Now, Paul Ryan said last week, you remember Paul Ryan, that poor son of a bitch that was Speaker of the House for a very short period of time. He said last week, before the Orange Bastard's most recent comments from Saturday and Sunday, Paul Ryan said, quote, he's a populist, authoritarian narcissist. So, historically speaking, all of his tendencies are basically where narcissism takes him, which is whatever makes him popular, makes him feel good at any given moment, end quote. Okay, that's a nice, let's have a session with your therapist kind of language to put it in. Right, Paul? You're not going to hear that on this podcast. Nowhere fucking near that. He is a potential mass killer. He is a degenerate psychopath. And there are millions, tens of millions of people in this country who want him. They want to worship at his feet. Now, dictators, of course, erase freedom. But the Orange Bastard who tried to overturn the 2020 election, he needs an electoral victory to get there. And Saturday night in New Hampshire, he called his campaign, quote, a righteous campaign to liberate this nation. And then, with the brain-dead fuckers who were there cheering, he said, quote, we are not a free nation. Oh, my God. What's it going to take? Is it going to take Trump getting this election, getting the presidency again, and then the country being torn to pieces to the extent that it probably can't be put back together again, in order to convince these mouth-breathing, knuckle-dragging, white, crazy fuckers, these useless lumps of protoplasm that go to these goddamn rallies, that Trump is not about freedom. Of course, I don't think any Trump followers would give a shit about freedom. And it's not even upsetting anymore when the Orange Bastard talks or praises other dictators like Kim Jong-un or Viktor Orban, this wannabe Nazi in Hungary. He did it again Saturday in New Hampshire, but he went a step further. He twisted around the idea put forward by his rivals, including Biden and Liz Cheney, that he is a threat to democracy for trying to overturn the last election. Huh? Twisting the fact that that's what he was. Instead, the son of a bitch now argues that it is Biden who is, to quote him, a threat to democracy, end quote. Now, as a way of proving that claim, the Orange Bastard cited the Nazi Putin, who said in September that Trump's legal problems are, quote, politically motivated persecution that is good for Russia, end quote. So Trump went on quoting this Nazi in Russia when he said, quote, it shows the rottenness of the American political system, which cannot pretend to teach others about democracy, end quote. That is Putin and Trump. Trump and Putin. Both of them. The truth is that Putin knows about rotten systems and putting political enemies in jail, about Alexei Navalny, who can't be located now, the dissident leader who was sentenced to 19 years in prison because he had the absolute temerity to suggest that somebody else should be president after 20 years of this fascist prick, Vladimir Putin. Now, we all know that the Orange Bastard is facing multiple criminal trials. But the catch is, and this is what I've been talking about for months, and I'm sure you have too, when somebody wants to overthrow a democratic system, they can use the tools of that democratic system to overthrow that democratic system. For example, Trump will have to be found guilty by juries that are unanimous. That's assuming he goes to trial at all before the election. If there is one maggot prick on any of the juries that are going to hear the charges against him, criminal and civil, that maggot prick, I guess just the criminal trials, but that maggot prick could upend everything and refuse to convict this Nazi bastard. Their U.S. Supreme Court, where we know 3 of his appointees are squatting, the Supreme Court has been asked by prosecutors to weigh in on whether Trump, because he happens to be a former president, whether or not he's immune from prosecution. I mean, when the Supreme Court rules on that one, if the Supreme Court, with the 3 Trump appointees and the Black Avenger and Sammy the Fish Alito, if those 5 decide to give Trump what he wants, not justice, not the law, not the Constitution, but what Trump wants, it's over before there's even a vote. This is what we're facing. Now, Chris Christie, who is still in the race for the presidential nomination, he said that the pending trials are contributing to Trump's increasingly intense rhetoric. There's a lot of things about Chris Christie I don't like, but at this point, I'm willing to shelve most of them. He was on CNN's State of the Union on Sunday, yesterday, and he said this, quote, Donald Trump realizes the walls are closing in. He's becoming crazier. And now he's citing Vladimir Putin as a character witness, a guy who is a murderous thug all around the world. End quote. A murderous thug. That's what Trump wants to be. Trump wants to be able to sit in his squalid little goddamn existence and order people dead. This would be the glorious pinnacle of the Trump quest for power, to be able to order people to be made dead. And then you have assholes like Lindsey Graham Cracker, a senator from South Carolina. He doesn't seem to care much what the orange bastard says. He was on NBC's Meet the Press on Sunday, and he said this. This is Graham Cracker, quote, "We're talking about language. I couldn't care less what language people use as long as we get it right." End quote. Graham Cracker, you little twit, you sorry little twit. You're going to be saying this right to the moment when Trump puts your ass, because you haven't been loyal enough, up against the wall someplace, and the last thing you hear is the word fire. Now, Graham Cracker also made it clear he doesn't agree with the poisoned blood analogy. Gee, Lindsey, really? He said on NBC, quote, "I believe in legal immigration. I have no animosity toward people trying to come to our country. I have animosity against terrorists and against drug dealers." End quote. Well, then, Lindsey, why haven't you and members of the House and the Senate worked out an immigration policy? You Christian fascists and you Republicans and you Democrats and you progressives, and worked out an immigration policy that would filter out the terrorists and the drug dealers. Well, you won't do it because, just like abortion was for 50 years, a hammer that the Christian Nazis in this country used against the electorate in order to try to get votes. And in some cases, they were very successful until the 3 Supreme Court justices who perjured themselves to get on the Supreme Court finally overturned Roe v. Wade. So now the Republicans have nothing. The Christian fascists have nothing to talk about. So we're going to talk about poisoning the blood and the vermin and the drug dealers and the criminals and emptying out the asylums in Central and South America. Oh my God, this is Hitler. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. The Progressive Voices Network brings you commercial-free commentary from today's leading progressive radio hosts and pundits, like me, Mike Malloy, 24 hours a day. I'm not your typical old guy from the 80s or the 90s talk radio host, and Progressive Voices is not your typical talk radio network. It's a listener-supported nonprofit with no corporate control whatsoever over our broadcast. So hosts like me, Mike Malloy, are free to rant and scream and carry on about whatever we like. We're often controversial, but we're never boring. Weeknights, 9 p.m. in the East, 6 p.m. in the West on the Progressive Voices Network. Always progressive, always on. I'm Mike Malloy. Keep it lit.